welcome to Co-Opinions. My name is Josh, and today I have Brent with me.
Yep.
So Brent, it's been a little while since we've recorded. Why don't you catch me up on what you've been doing?
I finally wrapped up Watch Dogs 2.
How was that?
You know, I feel bad. I feel like I should have given the game a better chance.
But
you know, I don't know if it's the mood I'm in or it wasn't the right game for me right now.
And it followed Breath of the Wild, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's a hard act to follow.
And there's a lot of gameplay elements I really liked about it.
About Watch Dogs 2.
Yeah, like I liked the addition you have drones. Like you have an RC drone and you can send it in to do stuff where you can't get to. You have a flying one that can't really do anything but be your eye in the sky, which I'm hoping there's probably going to be a third one based on story that they'll add additional functionality to it. I mean, there was stuff about the story I liked too. It just was not for me right now.
Sometimes games just you're not finding a right time to play them. I know that I've mentioned multiple times that Sunset Overdrive suffered from that for me. I just wasn't feeling a tongue-in-cheek humor kind of game at the time where I played it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like, the aspects like the senator that I believe Krause in our E3 podcast last year felt was like a Trump analogy.
Oh, yeah.
He really isn't in it that much. The bad guy is the man bun dude.
That they make fun of, you said.
Yeah, he's a wannabe hipster Silicon Valley guy. I mean, at the very end of the game, dependent on your point of view, if all the, if this is actually in the same universe as Assassin's Creed, it's all a company, Bloom.
Okay.
There's a, end credit scene where they set up possibly a 3. Probably. There's going to be a 3. And maybe it's the Templar. I don't know. There's some weird crossover stuff going on there.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry it wasn't that enjoyable, but hey, maybe it'll grow on you over time.
I'll give both of them suffered from other games being way too good and them just not being those
Would
games.
you play a third one?
Yeah, I want to give these a chance again. Just not right now. I have other games I want to touch.
All right. Well, Kara and anything else?
No.
Okay. Kara and I just wrapped up Salt and Sanctuary. That is a game by Ska Games, I believe. They're the people who made the Dishwasher series. And Charlie Murder.
We did play Charlie Murder.
We did play Charlie Murder. All those games have a very, very similar aesthetic to them.
I noticed watching you guys play it.
And this game feels like the guys who made the Dishwasher wanted to make a Dark Souls game. And it's not bad, but we first tried to play it and we didn't look anything up. And this isn't the kind of game you can't look anything up on. So I started as a knight and she started as a chef. The chef is the joke class. We basically made no progress whatsoever. So I said, we're starting over and we're going to use actual builds. We did the actual builds, and about 3/4 of the way through the game, we found an item that reduced all enemy resistances dramatically. After that point, boss fights never took us more than 30 seconds, including the final boss. And it was interesting, too, because for a Dark Souls games traditionally hand out a lot of their story through environmental context, which is something I want to talk about on a future podcast, environmental storytelling. I read a fascinating GDC presentation on it, Game Developers Conference. Anyways, so the only reason that it's even still in my mind was I really, really liked what the story ended up being. Salt and Sanctuary spoilers for anybody who might play through the game, fast forward like a minute. It turns out the final boss is a man-made god, and he's so jealous of divine gods that he figured out a way to kill them. He can put them in these coffins they can't get out of, intercept their prayers, and since gods need prayers to live, it basically starves them to death. So there's a hidden boss where you can actually fight some of the new gods, except they're all skeleton zombies. So it's kind of grim. And it really undercut the impact of fighting a boss who looked pretty awesome called the Nameless God. They even set it up so that way you have to take fall damage right before him, so it looks like you're kneeling before him before the fight. We killed him in about 25 seconds, so it really undercut the severity of it. But I would still recommend it. It had interesting endings, and I could go into this for a minute. But today's topic is the first part of a 3-part series, and after this, I've told Brent this, series are going on ice for a while because these multi-part series are draining.
I think we're out of ideas on multi-part series.
Will never be out of ideas on series.
I guess.
Neither here nor there. The first part is we're going to start talking about 3D Zeldas today to complement the 2D Zeldas I had Jake on for, and we're going to do these in chronological order for reasons that will become more evident. Now, the first game we're going to talk about in that vein is Ocarina of Time. And I may occasionally say Ocarina of Time 3D, but that's because I also played it on the 3DS. Now, this game was significant in an enormous amount of ways. Some of those ways included the fact that this was the first 3D perspective Zelda game. It was the first over-the-shoulder, you had control of the camera.
I mean, it brought about a lot of stuff. I mean, Epona, being able to ride a horse, was introduced in this game.
It was introduced, having another method of transportation. It was also a more... a higher degree of freedom with your musical instrument. They highly integrated the musical instrument into the gameplay. They also had the most narrative-driven story so far.
So far. No. We'll get into how that didn't work out later, in my opinion. But this game, it was amazing when you were approximately 10 years old because it was like you were getting an RPG story in an action game, which just was incredible for me. And there were some interesting things about the development of this game. Brent, you want to get into any of it? Well, yeah, I mean, originally it wasn't even designed for the 64. It was designed for the disk drive, I believe.
Yes, it was designed for the 64 Double D, which we never saw in America.
It did not, only stayed in Japan with a lackluster sale. Miyamoto wanted this game to be a first-person exploration game.
Correct.
Where when you encounter enemies, it then turns into side-scrolling action.
He had some ideas, he did.
Yeah, he did. I don't think that would have been good.
Some other things that I thought were interesting were the fact that originally they thought they might have such technical limitations that it kind of resembled Mario 64. Did you see this?
I did not see that.
Originally they thought that you might have to use Ganon's Castle as a hub world and go through different paintings into different worlds.
Huh.
Now, that idea ended up not having to be used because they were able to develop it more robustly, but they kept the idea for Phantom Ganon from the Forest Temple. So that's the whole going in and out of paintings idea.
Okay, I have...
Okay, disclosure.
Disclosure. This is one of 2 3D Zelda games Brent has not finished.
And the other one is the other one we'll be talking about.
But I've beaten enough of that game.
Yeah.
But I've seen decent amount of Ocarina of Time, and I know the story, so... And the development. I played up until the Fire Temple.
You make me
it's been 20 years.
20 years, nothing. I replayed this game in the last 5 on 3D. Well, and I actually have some bits and pieces to say about that. Anyways.
I would have replayed the Master Quest one, but I had that disc taken from me.
You will never get over that,
I will not.
It's been like a decade. I didn't take it, for the record. Brent had it semi-stolen and sold. Anyways. So, this game, it did a lot. It was incredibly highly reviewed at the time. It's still considered by some to be the best Zelda game of all time. I personally do not subscribe to that. Even before Breath of the Wild came out, I thought there were better 3D Zelda games than Ocarina of Time. Which isn't to say it's a bad game, but replaying it when you're older, it feels like the pacing isn't really there, and there can be some frustrating camera issues, and there's a lot of game design issues that I believe were really prevalent back in the late 90s that this displays, which makes sense.
First of its kind.
Well, yes and no. Quest 64 beat it out in terms of 3D adventuring with magic.
Okay, it was the first Zelda of its kind.
Oh, Brant,
gonna be that guy.
I am going to be that guy. That's what we're here for.
Was Quest made by Nintendo?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
I feel like this is Nintendo's first foray. the Zelda teams first.
How specific are you going to make this?
I'm gonna get specific.
Okay. Now, this game did a lot of interesting stuff in other regards as well. For example, and astute listeners may remember we mentioned this back in the 2D Zelda discussion, a lot of the... So we're going to give a very broad overview here real fast. Link wakes up, gets told he has to go get the Master Sword or something.
Is it the Master Sword?
Well, no, first he goes to talk to the Deku Tree. The Deku Tree tells him you're actually a Hylian after he gets the little jewel.
Yeah.
Then he says, go talk to Zelda. Zelda says, you need to stop Ganon. I don't remember why, but you get the other two jewels. Ganon sort of chases the princess away.
Well, kidnaps her.
He doesn't kidnap her. Impa rides off with Zelda.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. And at that point, you get the Ocarina of Time. You previously only had Saria's Ocarina. This was always some cold BS, too, when you're like, ooh, better Ocarina. Toss.
She made this specifically for me. Screw heirlooms.
Into the garbage. Anyways, you get the Master Sword at that point, which does a huge plot thing at that point. It puts you forward 7 years in time. At that point, you're introduced to the fact that, hey, the world kind of went into pot in that 7 years. You need to stop Ganon. Go collect all the medallions. After you beat the first dungeon, which is in the Forest Temple, you get the ability to go back and forth in between past and present, which involves some time shenanigans at some point. Looking at you, Song of Storms. And after you get all the medallions, you find out one of the NPCs assisting you, Sheik, is actually Zelda. And Ganon kidnaps Zelda. Sorry for spoilers. And then you have to go save Zelda.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember watching a friend of ours, Philip, beat, like, the last boss battle, fighting Ganon, starting from the Shadow Link.
Shadow Link was in Water Temple.
Yeah, but man, it's been so long. But yeah, I remember watching him when you think you defeat him, and then he comes back as Pig Ganon.
Yeah, so Brent brought up an interesting point in this. We blazed over the story real fast because you could talk about the story for a solid hour.
I feel like me, you, and Jake should just have an episode where we discuss the lore of Zelda.
An interesting point was brought up by our editor. This is not Co-Opinions, the Zelda show. We need to dial it back a little bit.
It's because he wants Destiny.
Yeah, whatever. Anyways... So, a lot of the names in this were actually taken from different parts of Zelda lore. A lot of the sages, those were all named after villages in Zelda 2.
Were they?
Right? How interesting is that?
Huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess we should also hit the fact that this is the war mentioned in Link to the Past.
Oh, yeah. Chronologically speaking, in terms of the quote-unquote official timeline...
When this came out, it was the first game.
Mm-hmm. So this is the game that precedes the three-way timeline split.
Yep.
And people had always speculated that there was a child timeline and an adult timeline because those kind of made sense. When you beat the game, you go back in time, and then the child version directly segues into Majora's Mask, which will be the second game we talk about, and the adult version segues into Wind Waker, which we will discuss in part 2 of this series. Now, something people had not considered was that the hero could die, which is the decline of the hero timeline, which is then followed by Link to the Past.
Which I find interesting, there are no 3D games in that timeline yet.
We still don't know about Breath of the Wild. They still haven't put it.
We'll get there. We'll talk about when we get to that episode.
Yeah,
I know where I think it is. But...
All right. Anyways, so they incorporated a lot of different elements. It was interesting to see what elements they decided to expand on. For example, great fairies were now creatures that gave you huge boosts of power. They're the ones that gave you your magic meter. They're the ones that gave you... They could upgrade your defense. I know they did some other stuff.
Yeah, it's been a long time on that
Well, there were some great fairies that gave you Din's Fire, Nehru's Courage, and Faor's Wind, named after the three goddesses. Because of the intense lore, they also referenced the goddesses pretty explicitly. There was some huge info dump at some point in it where they talk about like the history of Hyrule and the 3 goddesses left the Triforce.
Isn't that close to the beginning? Yeah, like the black and white video images where they're explaining it all.
Yeah.
Which is expanded upon in other games later on.
Well, and it becomes weirdly conflicted because in this one they focus solely on the 3. They never mention Hylia.
Well, we didn't.
Hylia. I mean,
wasn't mentioned until later games.
Wasn't Hylia mentioned in Twilight Princess? Definitely Skyward
the first
Sword.
one is Twilight Princess.
I can't remember if Hylia was mentioned in Wind Waker or not. We'll look it up in between segments, but you think she was I know for a fact she was she was definitely mentioned in Skyward Sword because that's a huge deal.
Well, when we get to Skyward Sword, I'll mention why I feel like there's a reason why in Ocarina of Time they don't mention it.
All right.
But now you made me lose my thought process.
Okay, so last thing we were talking about was how the Great Fairies were actual individuals. This game came after release-wise. It came after Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
But it did not carry almost any of the characters from it for obvious reasons. Link's Awakening was set in Link's dream world.
Yeah.
So this, unfortunately, and I'm going to say this huge grain of salt, if I have a divisive opinion in here, it'll be this. This game, unfortunately, made almost every subsequent 3D Zelda game emulate it. So, up until Breath of the Wild, they were all some different flavor of Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask switched up that formula in a really, really interesting way, but from there, the subsequent games, I loved Wind Waker, but you were on a boat a lot. Twilight Princess was good, but it was just basically Dark Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
And I can't actually wait until we talk about Twilight Princess because I'm going to make the case for why Twilight Princess wasn't a Zelda game.
And I have a counter.
I'm sure you do. But anyways, going back to Ocarina of Time.
Sorry about that. One thing I found interesting. I remember reading not too long ago, like some people were upset about the lore because the way they had envisioned that war that's talked at the time thing, they envisioned it differently. Like they expected it to be an actual like full-blown armies war type thing. And of course, that's not what Ocarina was.
Nope.
And also probably could not have rendered that.
Yeah, probably not. But Ocarina of Time to me kind of suffers from the issue that Seinfeld suffers from for a lot of people now. It seems really bland and milquetoast sort of now because everything since then has improved upon it. I can't really think of one thing at this point that Ocarina has done better than any of the subsequent games.
I don't think I can disagree with that.
Now, it definitely had
the musical element, I think, after Majora's Mask hasn't been used.
Okay.
Wind Waker has it.
So the musical element in regards to how you manipulated gameplay elements through the use of a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Now, I would generally agree with that. It is used heavily in Majora's Mask, but we'll touch on that. Wind Waker, it felt like it wanted to do that, but it didn't.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was there. Not like these two.
No. Twilight Princess did not at all. You forgot that the harp in Skyward Sword, and there is not a musical instrument.
Not that I can think of, not in Breath of the Wild.
So yeah, this game had a stronger emphasis on that instrument, and there was even a plot reason for it, which was interesting. Some other things. Had we mentioned the fact that Ganon, this was the first time they showed him as a human?
We have not. This is the first appearance of Ganondorf.
So that was an interesting thing for somebody who'd played Link to the Past. Was in Link to the Past they had mentioned that the King of Thieves was a person, but he was transformed by the Triforce. And that obviously meant at some point he was human, but we'd never seen that because in Link to the Past you only fought him as a pig. I never even considered he was anything but a pig in the first 2 NES Zelda games. So it was really interesting to see this character humanized. Even more interesting to see him turned into the giant pig monster at the end.
Yeah.
That was gruesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But in addition to not just anthropomorphizing him, which I don't think that's the right way to put that, because that would be making a pig human. He's not a human pig, he's a human.
Well, no, yeah.
Okay, they made him a dude. And
he's an evil entity inside a dude.
Okay, you're getting way ahead of yourself on this.
Spoilers for people who haven't played Zelda listening to this.
Anyways, some other thing, in addition to making him a person, they gave him a really thorough backstory, even for that game. He was the king of the Gerudo because
he's the only male.
Yeah. Any male born to the Gerudo had to be a dude. No, had to be the king. Well,
one would hope.
Shut up. Anyways, they had to be the king. This created some political strife, which leads to some of the other conflict. That's why Niburu went into the Spirit Temple, which is the last temple of the game. Anyways, that was kind of interesting. Another interesting thing was the fact that, and I'm racking my brain here, the Triforce was not specified by piece prior to this. There was no Triforce of Power, Wisdom, and Courage. It was just the Triforce.
Yeah.
So that was the first time they introduced that concept.
Yeah, like you see it in his hand, if I remember right.
In Ocarina of Time, yes, you see it in his hand. And
I've played so many other ones trying to remember the specific image of him having the Triforce on him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Courage one is the bottom right one.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I know Power's top.
And that's his, so.
Whose? Ganon's is Power.
Yeah.
You just said it was his.
I meant Ganon when I said his.
How was I supposed to know?
Okay.
Anyways. So, I don't want to sell this game short because it had some really interesting bosses. Even if it was super easy, the giant spider is the first boss.
God, I remember, yeah.
Or the... God,
I have such nostalgia for the Deku Tree Temple.
It takes like 7 minutes.
But I have nostalgia for it.
All right. The interesting take on the Dodongo and the Goron. And let's see, the third one. Is fun. The third one was dumb. It was where he fought a jellyfish in Jabu Jabu. Parasitic jellyfish, whatever. Yeah, see, that one was dumb. Phantom Ganon was interesting. Volvagia, the Fire Dragon was interesting. Let's see. And this is where we lost you, right?
I'm trying to remember if I actually fought the Fire Dragon or not.
Let's see. After that was that the Ghost Temple? No, it was a Water Temple because it was the amoeba thing that was irritating. And then after that was the Ghost Temple, which you had to fight Bongo Bongo, which was a weird boss. He was a ghost. You could only see... Oh my god.
I feel like I have actually watched someone fight this one.
I feel like we can't... So with the ability to display stuff in 3D, they also gained the ability to terrify children. Did you ever see anybody play the bottom of the well? So as a child, this is where time shenanigans happen.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So this is where time shenanigans happen. In the future, you learn the Song of Storms from a guy who gets frustrated that in the past, somebody played that song to drain the well. The only reason he knows the song from the past is because you, who learned it in the future, go back to the past to play it. Time shenanigans.
Looking at you, Marty McFly.
Ugh. But anyways, when you get to the bottom of the well as a child to get the Lens of Truth, you encounter the most terrifying monster. It's this weird white and red monster with hands that come up out of the ground. And the Redeads in that game?
God, I hate those things.
Oh, they were so creepy.
I hated going into Castle Town.
Ugh, it was so creepy.
I hate it when they latched onto you.
Yeah. Blah. Blah. So yeah, that was something they had going for them. But yeah, actually it's funny because as a child, again, 10-year-old child, it made me nervous to play some of those dungeons at night because I'm like, nah, there's zombies and ghosts.
I feel like, though, if someone wants to get into Zelda, this is one of the games they should start with.
Probably. I mean...
Especially 3D ones. At least start with this one.
Yeah. If anybody asks what Zelda game to start with, say one from 21 years ago.
I mean, it's a good start point.
It's actually not a bad starting point. And on top of that, it has since been released on the Nintendo 3DS with updated textures, which is interesting because it makes your character and other characters look significantly better than N64, but they don't update a lot of the textures for the town or locations, so you look real shiny and new comparatively speaking, and everything else looks like it's from 1997. So, you know.
These terrible old sets.
Yeah, could be better. It's like rendering a game character in HD on PS3 and then using the PS1 textures. This was not the best idea, guys. So the game definitely had a legacy because, as I stated, I really think that every game past this just took from it.
Yeah.
With the exception of Breath of the Wild, after this point the games became so narrative focused. Now I'll provide a mild counter for Majora's Mask, but they became so narrative focused, so sit there while I talk to you. Like, it was bleh. Now, you wouldn't know this because you never beat Link to the Past.
I did not.
Even that game, occasionally, every time you beat a major dungeon in the Dark World, they said, sit here while we throw some story at you for a while.
I did beat the one, so yeah.
You make me so sad sometimes. so sad.
Well, I'll beat it as soon as Jake beats a 3D one, so.
Has he not?
He's not.
Jake, make sure you listen to this so that way you can respond to Brent's criticism.
Oh, I've already said it to him.
All right, cool. So what else did we want to talk about in regards to Ocarina of Time? I know we kind of jumped all over and burned through it, but we really just wanted to talk about the different things that this contributed to the series as a whole. But one of the most important things, and we've touched on this in bits and pieces, were what were your thoughts about it, and I'll give my thoughts as well.
I mean, I love all the 3D ones, but yeah, this is my least favorite, probably.
I would have to agree with that. I would originally, after playing Twilight Princess the first time, had said that was my least favorite, but now that I've circled back around to it in the HD version, 10 years later, I have to say I gained an immense appreciation for it that we will touch on.
But this is still Zelda 3D games. Like, I still like all of them.
Yeah,
the same one is my least favorite is not.
To be the least favorite doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
I know when it came out, I loved it to death. I then rebeat it in 2 sittings a few years later. It's really not that long once you know what you're supposed to do. When I replayed it on the handheld, I got very frustrated because it is not a game meant for handhelds. I feel
that's why I'm against doing it. Like, I want it on a TV for the nostalgia.
Now, Majora's Mask played very well on a handheld. I will contrast that when we get to it. But this game felt cinematic in nature. Like, when you're playing it on the handheld, I remember specifically, there's a fight in the forest temple where you're fighting a Stalfos on a ship that's about to sink. And I remember, because of the targeting and the camera, I ended up going down with the ship, and I got so mad because I couldn't unlock off of him and get off because it just wasn't set up well. Now, that was also the year where I beat 7 Zelda games, so that didn't help much.
Yeah, probably not.
Mm-mm.
I mean, the last thing I'd like to add is, it did add a lot of staples to Zelda lore from there on out.
It did.
So, that something that really contributed.
But if there is nothing else we have to add on that front, no. Okay. We will go ahead and move on to the second game we're talking about in this segment, second and last game, Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
And this game, when it came out, it is a pretty common belief that it was underappreciated.
Yeah.
I believe that this game suffered from the same fate that Final Fantasy VIII did. That the people who were playing it didn't realize that they're not all the exact same. Now, how it's different. This game was a direct sequel, unlike Final Fantasy VIII. However, the mechanics changed dramatically. Now, it didn't change in a Zelda 1 to Zelda 2 fashion, but the structure was so different, and the plot was so different.
It was darker, that's for sure.
It was definitely darker. I mean, they basically start the game with you wearing a corpse's face. Now, it's the corpse of a tree person, so it's not quite as dark, but the different transformation masks you get, jumping ahead a bit, they're all death masks.
They are.
All of them.
God, I love this is the mechanic I love the most about this game.
Now, was it the transformations?
Yes.
So, let's before we talk about these mechanics, let's burn through real fast what the plot's supposed to be. The absolute most broad plot, you are playing as Child Link from the first game.
So having the child timeline.
You get your horse stolen, Epona stolen in the woods by Skull Kid wearing a weird mask having two fairies. You follow after him, fall down a hole. He turns you into a Deku. You come out in an area where the moon is about to crash into the world.
Terminus.
Is it Terminus or Termina? Termina. In 3 days, you become a human again just in time to watch the moon crash down, but you manage to turn back time because you get your Ocarina back from Skull Kid. And then that's when you find out you turn back time as a major game mechanic. You keep reliving the same 3 days the moon's going to come down over and over and over and over. Over the course of the game, you round up from the 4 dungeons surrounding Termina 4 giants who can stop the moon from falling. When you successfully bring them all together, you find out that it's not the Skull Kid who's bringing the moon down, but the mask itself bringing the moon down. At that point, you chase the mask up to the moon, because of course you do. You fight the mask, and you defeat the evil essence inside. Absolute broadest overview.
Yeah.
Now, in the process of going around to these 4 dungeons, you get these different masks. First introduced, now this is a great way to introduce it. They introduce the idea of you transforming by having you start the game as being transformed.
Yeah.
And to progress, you have to turn back into a person, which
they
shows
won't let you out of the main town
until you're a person again. And this game did so many things interesting and well. For example, when you first are going through the town to try and become a human again, they introduce you to these people who exist, the bombers, who exist solely to help others. And after you become a human again, they'll give you a little notebook that allows you to keep track of your different side quests. This is incredibly helpful because it shows the important times and dates that you have to interact with these people in order to finish helping them.
That was something interesting I was reading when I was reading development, and one of the criticisms was the amount of side. I guess it just never crossed my mind how many side quests there were. I know I didn't do all of them, and I did. Again, second one I didn't finish, but I came closer.
There is an enormous amount of side quests for 2 reasons. The first reason is the fact that there are really only 4 dungeons, 5 if you count, you get a full heart piece. Yeah. So in a game that has approximately 20 hearts, you only have 8 heart containers through the course of beating dungeons. This is significantly lower than the other games, so there's like 52 collectible heart pieces. In addition, there are 20 optional masks, some more optional than others, that you can collect through the course of the game. Now, these are strongly encouraged because if you turn in all 20 masks at the end of the game, you play a series of small areas right before the final boss. If you turn in all the masks to all the small games, you get the Fierce Deities mask, the final transformation mask, which turns you into an unstoppable demigod. It completely breaks the final boss. I actually have no idea how difficult the final boss is because I've always had the mask. I have no idea how hard he is. You don't know either because you haven't beaten the game. But this game, let's talk about the technical aspects just real fast. This was one of the games where you had to have the expansion pack. The blazingly fast 4 megabyte expansion pack. I know, right? And that allowed for greater draw distances, more characters on screen. It really allowed it to push the limits, but they got the game out stupid fast because as an N64 game, they reused an enormous amount of the assets from the first game. Yep. So while the while Ocarina of Time took approximately 4 development years to come out, Majora's Mask came out the very next year because there was a stunning similarity between the two. But the presentation was much, much different.
It was just the 3-day time. Adding that
3-day
in.
time was a big... I think that's really what turned a lot of people off, was the fact that the game, even though you definitely beat the dungeons in an order, it was much more non-linear in the approach.
There are times, like, if something happened, like, left it on pause, somehow got unpaused when you left the room, came back, the world is ending. Kind of really sucks.
It does. And that's where we'll talk about the 3D version a little later. Anyways, this game also got brought to 3DS. Some contributed to an online movement called Project Rainfall. Moonfall. Project Moonfall. Project Rainfall was something else. I may have talked about it with Kraus at some point. Non-consequential. Anyways, the idea of the fact you had to turn into these other characters to continue progressing, there was a lot good and a lot dark about that.
Yeah. Like, I wasn't a fan of the Deku because it's a Deku.
Yeah, and...
looking back, I had more fun with it than I think I did, but I just enjoyed playing as the Goron and the Zora.
So the Deku, they took a lot of... I thought there was a big amount of strength in the quote-unquote emotional gut punch behind the Goron and the Zora, because the Goron, like... The kid is crying for his dad, and his dad went and died in the mountain. And with the Zora was attempting to going to get not Princess Ruto's eggs back, because her eggs had been stolen by pirates.
Yeah.
And he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you find him on the beach.
Yep. In the Deku, that one was also sad, but because they were trying to introduce you to the concept of transformation without burdening you with going through the same find them, help them, transform them. It turns out, I don't know if you ever picked up on this, the Deku Butler from the Deku Palace, the one that you race to get the, not the bunny hood. The scent mask.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're going from the beginning of the game to Termina, you find a weird tree thing. Turns out that's the Deku Butler's dead kid. So, Skull Kid killed a Deku to turn you into him. Oh. Yeah, it's pretty dark. Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Yeah, in the final credit scene, you can see the Deku Butler crying in front of that tree.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not a great time.
One thing I did like, to bring it back uplifting here, was I do like that when you're each transformation, you had a different instrument. Something that plays out later on, too.
Yeah. So when you're saying it played out later on, do you mean in the milk bar?
Yeah.
Okay. That was just a side quest. So for each of the different transformations, if you're playing as Link, you have an ocarina. If you're playing a Deku, you have horns.
Yeah.
If you're playing as the Goron, you have drums. And if you're playing as Zora, you have a
guitar.
Is it guitar or bass? It doesn't matter. Yeah. They actually... utilize this to humorous fashion in a side quest near the end of the game where you can go up on stage and play different melodies with your different transformations, and it lets you get a heart piece because you make the guy at the bar cry. Good times. But how many side quests in that game jumped out at you? To me, it was a fair bit.
Like, off the top of my head, especially the ranch one.
The ranch one's a big one.
Saucer.
Yeah, the part where you have to keep people from being alien abducted. Now, admittedly, when you turn it on Song of Halftime, it's not nearly as bad. And that was another thing, is that there were hidden songs in this game, which were awesome. There were 2. The Song of Halftime, when you played maybe it was a Song of Reverse Time, I don't know.
Yeah, you slowed down time. I think you had to play it in reverse.
You had to play it in reverse. And then there was the Song of Double Time. And that moved you forward to the next 12-hour increment. Now, they improved on this significantly for the 3DS version. It allowed you to move forward to any time within the upcoming day.
Ooh.
That was awesome because of quests like the wedding quest. That quest sucked.
Got another one, the hand in the toilet.
So the hand in the toilet quest, between midnight and 3 a.m. in a hotel, a hand just pops up and asks for paper, please. And you can give them any paper, including plot pieces of paper. So like you could give the love letter from one person to this hand. Yeah, it was gross. But this wedding quest was infamous because there were these NPCs who were supposed to get married, and Skull Kid turned one of them into a child. And you have to basically deliver messages, and he goes to get his stolen mask back. And it's honestly super sad because the two of them, the quest ends less than an hour before the moon is going to hit, and they bring their wedding masks together and make the couple's mask. And they're like, yeah, we appreciate everything you've done, but we think that we're just going to go out together. Like, wow, this sucks. Later. You just turn back time. And every time you turn back time, you undo what you've done. With the exception, you always keep the giants and your masks. You also keep all non-consumable items.
And thankfully, the bank has an emergency time-lapse thing that sends it back in time for you.
Somehow, your little mark you have from the banker is robust enough that he can tell how much funds you had, even if this is the first minute you've been in town. Truly amazing.
Oh, God.
But there was so much about this game that was so interesting.
I really liked... Man, I'm trying to remember the Forest Temple one. I really liked the Goron. I liked the boss battle, the goat.
I hated that.
Really?
I did.
See, I liked it for some reason.
I did not like the Goron rolling mechanic that much. And that's crucial to that boss fight.
It is.
Otherwise, you just stand there and try to shoot arrows at it.
I also really found the Water Temple interesting.
Even though, isn't that where you ate it?
The boss.
Okay.
The boss was the thing that kept me from... That fish sucked.
Well, it will not help you in any way, shape, or form. But in the 3DS version of the game, it's a harder boss fight. In the N64 version, you had two ways of fighting the boss. You could either fight him on the land, or you could fight him in the water. In the water was faster but harder. On the land took for a while, but it was easier. In this one, you can fight him on the land, but after he's about half dead, they drop the platform out and you have to fight him in the water. That sucks.
But I really liked the changing the pipes to get to different rooms, changing the water flow. I don't know. I just found that incredibly interesting.
That was one of the more interesting, and we completely glossed over this in the first game, how apparently everybody found the water temple irritating. Honest to God, I don't... Oh, you never got there.
I never got there.
Anyways, this was honestly one of the more basic versions of the water temple. I never found it to be that difficult, but I really can't off the top of my head, and this isn't me humble bragging, I can't think of any of... I take that back. The Ice Temple in the original Link to the Past, you had to do a block puzzle that was awful. So that was one I had difficulty with. They have since modified that in every iteration of the game. You can also bypass it with a trick. Anyways, so in that one of the things they tried to do in the temples to add an extra dimension of complexity, do you remember this? Great fairies.
Oh, yeah.
In every temple, you had to collect 15 great fairies, and they did various awesome things. In the first temple, they sucked because all they gave you was a better spin attack.
Yeah.
That's lame.
You know, looking back on it, we're harping on the railing on the Deku. Like, I feel bad now.
You're railing on the Deku. I thought he was fine.
Well, I feel bad now thinking about the way you're treated in town.
Yeah, you're a second-class citizen.
You are a pariah.
Dogs attack you. Yeah. It's awful.
Like, when you come back as the Goron and the Zora,
they're so much nicer, dude.
Yeah.
So much nicer. Which, that reminds me of another little quirk that I forgot about. Anyways, I'll just say it now. When you go into the hotel as the Goron, and you take the Goron Messenger's hotel room, because you just happen to have the same name as the delivery guy. Yeah, you make him sleep outside.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. You jerk. but he's got 100 rupees in there. What are you gonna do? Good times.
Yep.
Anyways, so the Great Fairy, each one had an interesting reward, a treasure. The first one was lame. It was a better spin attack. The second one doubled your magic meter.
Yeah.
The third one doubled your defense, I believe. It put a little white outline around all your hearts, which I believe doubles your defense. A lot of people didn't do these because they weren't mandatory and you could beat the game without doing it.
I don't know if I did the third one. Maybe I don't remember that one.
The final one has a special cold, dark place in my heart. Because if you get all 14, you get that game's version of the Bigoron sword, which that was something Ocarina of Time did as well, but we glossed over it. You had the trading quest, which eventually became time-bound. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
First you hatched a cuckoo, you used the cuckoo to make this guy wake up. He gave you like milk. You took the milk here. It gave you. Then eventually you got a Bigoron sword out of it. It sucked though. This one, if you collect all 15 fairies in the fourth, they give you the Great Fairy Sword, which is a bedazzled Bigoron sword. It was a pain in the butt to do, so I never did it. But then in the 3DS version, I did, and I forgot to turn it in before I turned back time. Yeah.
Fourth one's Giant's Temple.
The fourth one is Giant's Temple.
That's the one that was the last one I got to.
And it was interesting in this game because the items they give you in all the temples are always arrows. In the first one, they give you the bow.
Yeah.
And the second one, they give you the fire temple. Third one's ice arrows. And final one's light arrows.
Yeah.
And the Giant's Temple, I mean, everything about it had a really interesting build-up to each of these.
Turning the temple upside down was interesting.
Turning the temple upside down was an interesting thing, but even going to the Deku Palace, you had to try to clear the monkey's name. Going to the Snowfall Palace, you had to find the ghost of the one guy so you could get the Lens of Truth, so that way you could put the guy to sleep who was defending it. You had to collect all of the eggs for the Zora, so she would sing the song that allowed you to summon the fairy. No, it was a fairy, just not a great fairy.
Yeah.
To the water temple. And the fourth one, you had to learn the song that allowed you to make statues of yourself. The super creepy statues. Yeah. Oh my god. Well,
leave this one here.
What was made even creepier about the fact was they always made me think that you were creating statues of the people whose the masks were of. So it wasn't making a statue of you, it was making a statue of the person whose soul is in that mask. That's how I always saw it. And it's weird, and it's creepy, and it's weird.
Well, first off, speaking of statues, the addition of the owl statues.
So the addition of the owl statues was interesting because they did two things in this game.
Saved.
They did a one-time save in N64, which is to say you could basically use it as a quick save. You save here, you load there, but then the save is wiped.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think they changed that in the 3D version, but I can't remember. They also worked as warp points, so you could warp in between the different ones.
Yes.
I don't remember when you learned the Song of Winds or whatever.
It's
pretty early.
On the Deku, yeah.
Yeah, pretty early. So... anyways, let's see.
What else did we miss for this game? Because this game is great.
Well, there was just... the game deals with death a lot.
Well, there is the fan theory that Link is dead.
Oh, God.
I don't like this one.
No, it's dumb. Go ahead. You have more to add here?
The fan theory is that the entire game is just purgatory and Link is dying.
Dumb. When would he be dying?
When he fell.
Okay. What is his redemption?
I don't know if there was a redemption. He just dies.
Dumb.
I don't know. I need to look the theory.
You should have done more research. Dumb. This gets a dumb seal of approval. Dumb. Anyways, the They also take your horse away at one point, and you don't get your horse back until halfway through the game.
Is it halfway through?
Pretty sure.
Yeah, because it's after the so it's got you got to be the Goron to break through the rocks.
Because they authorize you to get the Goron powder keg.
Yeah,
which is just a super mega bomb.
Because only Gorons can handle the mega bomb.
Right. Yeah, I liked so much about this game. Like, we didn't even touch on the fact that there's a crow that can steal your stuff, and then you have to buy it back from. Yeah.
God, I hate that thing.
Yeah, but if you kill the crow, it gives you 200 rupees.
Maybe I did.
I killed it all the time. Or the fact in this game, I really thought they streamlined the gold Skulltulas because they had Skulltula houses now, both of which were required to 100% the game. Because one of them gave you a mask, the Mask of Truth, I believe. That was the first one in the forest. And the second one gave you the Giant's Wallet. Both of which, you needed the Giant's Wallet, which held 500 rupees, in order to buy the Up All Night mask, which was necessary to turn in for the Fierce Deities mask, and also necessary to get 2 heart pieces from Grandma Anju, who told you stories that would put you to sleep. There was just so much stuff. Like, this game was layered.
It also gets, one of the games where Ganondorf is not the villain.
At all.
Nope. It is Majora's Mask.
We touch on this in one of the other Zelda things we talk about. But this game is one of the reasons I think we should have more Zelda bad guys. Majora, super interesting. We won't talk about him in this series, but Vati from the 2D games, super interesting. Why don't we see more of these guys? Tell me you don't want to see more of Majora.
Yeah, I'd like to.
That would be cool.
Yeah, there's a story reason, and we will get to that later.
Is there? Oh, why it's always Ganon?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for example, tell me there's not a prime crossover opportunity between the Twilight people and the Majora people. Like, there has gotta be some overlap there.
Well, and we'll also get into that later because, Skyward Sword too.
I am convinced that there has to be some similarity between the people from Twilight Princess and the people who did made the Majora mask. Just because of some little small details.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely touch on this.
But this game I loved tremendously. Even when I was younger, I loved it. I've replayed it older. I still enjoy it. If there's one fault I have in it, it's the fact that once you know what you're supposed to do, you don't have to talk to essentially anybody in this game. Because if you know where you're supposed to go, you can just go there. The purpose of most of the NPCs is to kind of direct you where you're supposed to go. So if you know that you're supposed to go into the forest and you're supposed to get a mushroom to get a red potion to save the witch in the woods, you don't have to talk to anybody about it. If you know that you're supposed to go into the mountains to try and save the Gorons, you don't have to talk to anybody. So, though it's good because it shows that the game lets you do your own thing and doesn't hold your hand, it also lets you completely breeze by so much of this game's character, which is a bummer because the game has a lot of awesome character.
It does.
But it's also a game that strongly advocates do not stop moving. So,
well, they wanted to make a different game from Ocarina of Time. They didn't.
They did, and they succeeded.
I know Miyamoto had the least involvement in this one.
Anyways, was there anything else about this game? This game was so interesting with so many little details.
God, I love this game.
And I do not feel like it was appreciated when it came out. I think it gained a huge amount of appreciation since then. So much so that whether or not the fans had a direct involvement, there was that 3D port. They finally got 3DS port. And I hope we see more from the Majora's Mask universe. That's where they introduced Tingle. Tingle's been around ever since then. Sort of. Actually, has he been?
Twilight Princess.
Yeah, was he in Twilight Princess?
Yeah.
How was he in Twilight Princess? He was in Wind Waker.
Was he in Wind Waker?
Yeah.
He's in Twilight Princess. We'll look this up in between.
Okay, I'm not. My vote is he's not. We'll come back and determine
But
whether
it is
or
the
not it is.
same timeline.
Anyways. So, I think that's about good for this. What do you think, bro?
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been enjoyable. Make sure to jump online and tell us what you thought about Ocarina of Time, what you thought about Majora's Mask. We will be touching on some more 3D Zeldas in the next episode. But until then, Brent, thank you for coming on.
Yep.
My name is Josh, and this is Co-Opinions.